Hi there, welcome to Taking the Biz. In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at an economic concept known as deflation. Now, the first thing to make sure we understand is what deflation is, as it's an often misunderstood concept. So, deflation is a fall in the price level in an economy. It's where we take that basket of goods that we talked about in our video on inflation, which we'll link to in the top corner there. It's where we take that basket of goods, and when we track the prices of the goods in that basket, deflation means that the prices on average have fallen in that basket rather than risen. Now, deflation does not occur very often, and what students often confuse deflation for is just a slowdown in the rate of inflation. And this is illustrated with the numbers that we have behind us on the board here. So here we have some inflation rates for 2016, 2017 and 2018. And students might often see those numbers and assume that that means that we've got deflation because we've got lower percentages year on year. But that's a misunderstanding of what these figures show, because actually what we've got on the board there is inflation, but just a slowdown at the rate at which prices are rising by. So the fact that in 2017 inflation has fallen from 3% to 2% still means that prices have risen. Prices in 2017 are 2% higher than they were in 2016. So prices are still rising, but the rate at which they've risen by is not as great as the period before. Similarly, in 2018, if we have inflation rates of 1%, that still means that the price of the basket of goods has increased by 1%. Now, that's not as big an increase as it was the year before, but it still means prices are 1% higher. So don't mistake a slowdown in the rate of inflation for what today's tutorial is on, which is deflation. And that is where we actually have drops in prices in the consumer prices index. It's where the price of the basket of goods is actually cheaper than it was the period before. Now, what we're really interested in is how businesses might react or might be affected by this concept known as deflation. And it certainly sounds like a good thing. And for us as consumers, a fall in the level of prices in the economy sounds incredibly attractive. Well, for firms, if deflation is a short-term phenomenon, then it may indeed have some benefits to it. Because if prices are falling in the economy, then it makes sense that the firm's costs may also be falling. So whether that be their production costs and the cost of their raw materials, or the cost of their bills and their outgoings and the energy that they have to source. In the short term, if those prices are falling, but a firm is able to keep its own selling price at the same level, then it may actually be beneficial for the firm, and it may allow them to experience a short boost in profit margins. Because if their costs are dwindling at a time when they keep their prices the same, then it may mean that they are able to preserve a greater profit margin on the products that they sell. And if the demand for their products continues to be constant, then it means that in financial terms, the firm might experience just a small bump in profits. Thing is, that phenomenon's not likely to play out if deflation is more sustained and if it takes place in the longer term. Because if prices continue to fall, it can have an impact on consumers that's actually quite negative for firms. Because as prices continue to fall, consumers start to think about whether now is actually the right time for them to be purchasing goods and services, or would they be better delaying their consumption decisions, maybe buying something next month rather than this month, or in 6 months' time rather than now, because they are envisaging that prices are going to continue to fall. So why buy something now when you know that if you just hold on, it's going to be cheaper in the future? Now, that's fine from a consumer's point of view, but for firms that means that they're missing out on sales. It means that they're going to start to experience falling levels of demand as more and more consumers are delaying purchasing decisions until some undefined point in the future. And so firms are going to have to bear the brunt of these falling levels of demand and make decisions and craft strategies accordingly. So if their demand starts to fall, if their sales start to fall, then it might mean that firms need to start reducing their own prices perhaps more rapidly in order to try and appear so attractive to consumers that they make their purchasing decisions now. But that's going to mean that their own profit margins are going to be squeezed. It means why they might preserve their sales volume, their sales value, and the revenue they're making from their sales is going to start to suffer. It also means that the firm might have to start making some more peripheral decisions about its own costs as well. So if deflation is sustained and prices continue to fall across the economy, the firm's going to have to look at some of its own costs, particularly its own labour costs, and can it really justify giving employees pay rises at a time when prices across the economy are tumbling? And so the cost of living is falling. And so that can bring firms into conflict with their workforces and their workforce representatives as they start to take on workers on contracts that are not as generous perhaps as they once were, as they start to refuse their workforce pay rises and start to freeze pay levels for staff. So that can create kind of HR issues that the firm might have to absorb and might have to try and combat through other HR strategies. Another way that it affects consumers, particularly in the long term, is you've got to imagine prices might be tumbling inside the economy, and that might mean that workers are experiencing price freezes. Some unfortunate workers might find that because some firms are experiencing falling demand, they're actually suffering redundancies. There might be rises in unemployment. There might be people left without jobs. And at the time all of these things are occurring, the one thing that's not falling is consumers' debt levels. If consumers have taken out loans and mortgages, then prices inside the economy might be falling and their own wage levels might be static, or if they're having to look for new jobs, they might have to take on work being paid less than they were before. So workers might be experiencing falling incomes or frozen income levels, but it may be that their debt levels that they've got are still preserved at the same high level. So they've taken out a £250,000 mortgage, they've got a £25,000 car loan, they've got £10,000 worth of credit card loans, and those payments aren't affected by the deflation. Those payments aren't coming down. But the workers' own incomes are being squeezed and their own wages are tumbling. So that's going to affect their purchasing decisions even greater. They're going to begin to start rationalising, what do they really need to buy? Where can we make cutbacks? Where can we cut expenditures? Where can we reduce our unnecessary bills? Can we trade one good and service for an inferior, cheaper version in order to carry on surviving, to carry on living? And all of this is going to form a big melting pot for firms that's going to impact on their demand, on their sales volume, on their ability to experience economies of scale. Their own kind of revenue figures are going to be affected. Their dividends then that they give on to shareholders are going to be influenced as well. So whilst deflation and price levels falling sounds very, very attractive, and in the short term, if firms can keep their own prices the same and they're experiencing a fall in their own costs, it may be attractive for firms. Deflation in the long run can actually be as damaging or more damaging for businesses than high rates of inflation can be. Fortunately, we don't find deflation occurring very often in an economy. So there we go, there's the concept of deflation. Its impact on businesses really depends on how long or how sustained these reductions in prices go on for. But deflation in the long term can have some pretty serious consequences for the economy, for consumers, and for the decision making of firms. Good luck with your ongoing revision. Keep on taking the biz. See you very soon.